Nuuspod, onbevange, onbegrens, onbevooroordeel.
Goeiedag, welkom by Nuuspod en as die mense die koerante dophou, dan lyk dit of daar 'n groot krisis aan die kom is. Eskom wat sê ons praat van fase 6 Beurtkrag en selfs fase 8 as gevolg van geweld en betogings, protes by van die kragstasies. En om sin te probeer maak hiervan, praat ons met energiekenner Chris Yelland om by hom te hoor of hy vir ons 'n bietjie kan uiteensit wat besig is om te gebeur by Eskom. Chris, good afternoon. Welcome to Nuuspod.
Many thanks, and good day to your listeners.
Chris, I think that's the big question. What's happening? What are we up to against here?
Yeah, so look, you remember before this industrial action, this so-called illegal strike action that is occurring at Eskom right now as a result of wage disputes, we were experiencing intermittently between stage 2 to stage 4 load shedding. Now, Eskom have indicated that as a result of this industrial action, a further 4,000 megawatts of power is at risk. 4,000 megawatts is equivalent to stage 4 load shedding. So, if this risk materializes as it appears to be doing, then an extra 4 stages of load shedding on top of the stage 2 to stage 4 load shedding that we were experiencing before this industrial action will take us to stage 6 to stage 8. That's where we find ourselves, and Eskom have announced today at their media briefing that there is a high likelihood that stage 6 load shedding will be implemented this evening if they are unable to bring back onto the grid 4 units that have come off the grid as a result of various reasons. Now, they say they are struggling at the moment to bring this generation capacity back onto the grid. And they're saying that they're struggling because of this industrial action, because access to the power stations is being inhibited. Staff, expert staff or key skilled staff is being prevented from entering the power station. There's intimidation, there's some violence going on, and maybe even some of the key staff are being, are themselves on strike illegally, according to Eskom. So the point is that if these 4 units that they're struggling to bring on stream cannot come on stream by 5 o'clock today, we're going to be into stage 6 load shedding. That doesn't mean to say it's definitely going to be happening, but if they can't get these things back on stream, it will be happening.
Chris, the industrial action is mentioned, as you have just mentioned there, and immediately some people are saying, "Oh, but are we back at July last year, just this time at Eskom?" Your answer to that?
Yeah, look, in a way, do you remember some years ago now, Pakamani Khadebe, the CEO at the time, announced that there would be no wage increases. And virtually immediately, the country was plunged into load shedding as a result of industrial action. That means picketing at the gates of the power station, preventing staff from entering, intimidating staff, preventing trucks carrying coal from entering, and that kind of thing, as well as even some suggestions within the plant of some deliberate damage which could be classed as sabotage. So we're back in that kind of environment. And of course, industrial action and wage increases happen every year around about this time. Eskom, the unions, that's NUMSA and NUM, have been asking for a 15% wage increase. That's about 3 times the inflation rate. I think they've conceded a bit to 14%. But in any case, it's still way above government's target of inflation-related wage increases, which would be around about 5%, which is what Eskom have basically offered on the table at the moment. It hasn't found favor with the 2 unions that I mentioned, and so they've embarked. Eskom has called a dispute, and in the meantime, certain of the Eskom people have embarked on this wildcat strike. Now, you know that Eskom is declared an essential service, the supply of electricity, and under the law as it stands, people, workers at essential service facilities like Eskom are not permitted to strike. So Eskom has been to court. They've got an interdict, but it's all very well having a law and a piece of paper that interdicts them from going on strike. The reality is they still go on strike. It is an illegal strike technically, but ultimately these things have to be resolved one way or another. If this dispute continues, if the police are not able to contain the kind of intimidation and picketing and violence that occurs in these circumstances, the situation could get worse than stage 6.
Chris, so with other words, what you try, just let me get onto the same page, that this is more an industrial action rather than a political motivation for you.
Well, certainly the industrial action part exacerbates pre-existing load shedding. As I mentioned, even before the industrial dispute, we were having load shedding. So the issues of the shortage of generation capacity certainly predate, significantly predate this particular industrial action, but this industrial action worsens the situation considerably. So you can basically say, I mean, is a wage dispute politically motivated? Well, I don't know. Workers would argue that they're fighting for a living wage. It's all, in the eye of the beholder. Other people will say that this is, reckless and irresponsible to make wage demands in the current circumstances that are 3 times the inflation rate at a time when Eskom is on its knees financially. It's not a going concern. It cannot even pay the interest on its debt without, massive injections of about 50 billion rand a year of government money, taxpayer money, in order to keep Eskom afloat. So is it politically motivated? I don't know. They would argue that it's not. It's just, they want a living wage. Other people will say that, Eskom staff and workers are very well paid by South African standards, amongst the best paid people in South Africa, if you were to compare it with other industries. So, yeah, some people will say it's politically motivated, some wouldn't.
The Afrikaans press is saying that that Eskom is under siege. Is it press media sensation?
Well, that's what Eskom are also saying. They're saying that it's under siege. These are reckless actions. They're illegal actions. There's no place for it in law. They've been to court. They've got an interdict preventing what is happening from happening, but it's still happening. So Eskom are putting out the fact that they are under siege, and I suppose certain parts of the media, if not most of the media, is following that line. But if you speak to Num and Numsa, they will tell you something different. It's, I suppose, all about your worldview. My personal view is that to demand a 15% increase at Eskom in the current circumstances, at 3 times the inflation rate, is out of line with government policy. Is out of line with public policy, the treasury policy, Eskom's ability to pay. And I think it is not the right approach, and certainly doing anything illegal and intimidating and engaging in acts of violence and in destruction to property is out of the question for me. But some people don't think it's out of the question.
Chris, whatever the reason, whatever the motivation, I think the big question is, what does Phase 8 even mean?
What does what mean?
What does Phase 8 even mean?
Yeah, look, the best way of figuring this out is to, put yourself in onto Eskom's Push, which is an app out there in your area, and have a look at what stage 18 means in terms of how many hours a day are you down for. It's basically between 6 to 8 hours of load shedding over a 24-hour period, depending on the area you live in, or depending on whether you're supplied by Eskom or by municipality. So it is very, very disruptive on day-to-day life. It is very disruptive on traffic, okay, because of traffic lights, traffic congestion, transport. It's incredibly disruptive on commerce and industry. It'll have huge impacts in the economy, on jobs and employment and GDP and all of these things. So it has very far-reaching implications, and also has far-reaching implications of foreign domestic investment and even just domestic investment in South Africa. People are unlikely to invest in a major expansion of a production facility or factory or plant or mine when they are not sure about the power trajectory, the price of power, number one, and the security of supply of electricity, number two. These are big things that affect investors' decisions when they are looking at investing and expanding their operations in South Africa. I know of companies and mining operations and cement operations and large industrial that simply take their money elsewhere because South Africa is not the level of uncertainty around electricity supply and electricity and energy policy is simply too high, and there are better and more attractive places for them to invest money in. So it really does play a major role in inhibiting growth and investment, and that means jobs and employment.
Chris, how long can we cushion phase 8 load shedding in South Africa? How long of it can we take?
You know, people tend to think of things like this as a kind of a cliff that you fall off at a certain point. You know, after a certain time, you fall off the cliff. The reality is different. You know, people are very resilient and innovative, and they start making plans. If you were to look at Nigeria as a country, load shedding of the levels that we have are nothing. They have it much worse. But they adapt their whole lifestyle, their business style, diesel generators, renewable energy, all kinds of alternative plans are put into place, and that's what happens. But it all comes at a cost. And ultimately, when the economy doesn't grow as fast as it should be growing, employment is inhibited, high levels of unemployment. We already have very high levels of unemployment, and it just worsens the environment. But the world doesn't come to an end in South Africa with stage 8 load shedding, even after, you know, several months of stage. It just means costs go up and people have to make alternative arrangements. Of course, there is suffering in the process, but it's not the end. The world doesn't come to an end.
Okay, because that is the question, because everywhere on social media, people are saying moer toe.
Ja, ek ook sê moer toe. Maar.
Maar jy sê dit is daarom nie die einde van die wêreld nie, ons sal dit oorleef.
Ja, ons sal dit oorleef. We will start making plans. Far-sighted business and industry and commerce are already making plans. I am making a plan in my own business. I have a battery right next to me, a big one, that can see me through for 8, 9, 10 hours of load shedding in a single stretch, so that I can carry on my business behind my laptop, behind my computer with some lights, my printer, going for a good period. People have to start making these plans to ensure they have the necessary resilience. And every business should be looking at this very, very seriously to see what they can do to become more resilient in the face of extended periods of load shedding. That's what you have to do. Unfortunately, the poorer of the poor and the poorer people have less resources to make a plan. That's the problem. This can lead to major social unrest. If we have stage 8 load shedding for extended period, there can be social unrest, political social unrest. It can threaten the stability of the government. We have a whole lot of crises coming up, including the Pala uncertainty, including the Zondo report, including the ANC elective conference at the end of this year. This kind of situation going on for an extended period can affect social cohesion and affect the political outcomes.
Smaller businesses, though, they can take quite a knock, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm a one-man business, one-person business. Okay, I have a few colleagues. They also can make plans. So I work from home. One can do a lot, at that small business level, to the extent where you just don't feel the impact of load shedding anymore. But you have to invest some money to get there. And it means it's an added cost of doing business, but it doesn't increase your output. It just enables you to continue at your current level. So a significant investment has to take place that doesn't add to the productivity. It just secures your ability to continue. So there are things that can be done, but they all come at a cost, unfortunately, one way or another.
Chris, just regarding the industrial action, I see police have been deployed at some of the power stations, but nobody have been arrested yet. It looks like Eskom is handling this very carefully. Why?
Yeah, look, it is always a delicate situation. It is very tempting to go in there like a bull in a china shop and arrest people, etc. But it can make things worse. It doesn't necessarily, and people want to make things better and not worse. So it's a kind of a delicate balancing act. On the one hand, one needs to put out the right messages, but if you are involved with delicate negotiations, sometimes it's better not to take precipitous action that just precipitates a worsening and a hardening of attitudes and making the negotiation more difficult to reach a conclusion and a settlement. So I can understand how difficult it must be, but ultimately, the police must do their job, and Eskom must do its job, and the prosecuting authorities must do their job. And, you can't just Eskom is not a law enforcement agency. It doesn't have powers of arrest. It doesn't have powers to investigate and bring charges and prosecute, in the courts of law. There are other government agencies that are responsible for that. So from Eskom's point of view, industrial relations is a very important part of any business, especially a business like Eskom where they have, I don't know exactly how many these days, but between 36 and 40,000 employees. You need the support of your workforce, of the middle management, the senior management, the executive, the board, all have to work cohesively together. And if industrial relations break down to the extent where there is a toxic environment of confrontation at all levels, it doesn't help anybody, least of all the South African economy.
Chris, then just while I have you online, a little bit off topic, but still with Eskom. Andre de Ruyter, who said that he managed to make land available for private investors. How good is that news? Is it possible? Is it going to bring him into a clash with Gwedi Mantashe?
I think it's a very good thing what's happening. I don't think it brings him into a clash with Gwedi Mantashe or the DPE minister or government or anything like that, because they are basically operating perfectly normally within the system that is available to them. Eskom is a significant landowner. They own 40,000 hectares of land in South Africa. Some of this land is really close to the existing old coal-fired power stations. These old coal power stations are going to be decommissioned. There is a very significant shortage of grid access in South Africa, and there are areas of South Africa where grid access is very constrained and difficult to get. However, these lands that are near Eskom power stations, old power stations, have got existing grid connections. that can be very readily used by independent power producers. The law has been amended to allow independent power producers up to 100 megawatts without a generation license. But they do have to have grid access. They do have to have land use authorization. And the fact that they've got land use authorization, Eskom being the landowner, it's leasing this land for use for this purpose. The fact is that there is an existing grid connection or grid connections at these old power stations, means that delivery of independent power producers up to 100 megawatts can be delivered much faster than the normal public procurement processes that are underway through the Department of Mineral Energy and its IPP office, the so-called Renewable Energy IPP program, the Risk Mitigation IPP program. So this initiative by Eskom to deliver, the first round is 1,800 megawatts. That can be delivered much quicker than the public procurement processes. And that is the first auction of Eskom land, the first 4,000 hectares out of a total of 36,000 hectares. So there's another 32,000 hectares up Eskom's sleeve, which they can auction off progressively, test the market, and of course it earns revenue from Eskom on land that would otherwise not be used. And there are many opportunities, not just for renewable energy, but for the so-called just energy transition, where one can use the land not only for solar PV panels, for example, but also for agriculture underneath the solar PV panels, intensive farming. So one has to be really innovative. And I think this is a very innovative approach that Eskom is taking. It is basically leveraging these land assets that they've had that are not producing anything productive on that land, and is turning it into a productive outcome that can help the load shedding situation and help the energy transition and help the GDP of South Africa and employment, jobs.
Chris Yelland, thank you so much for making time for us. I appreciate it very much. All the best.
Thank you very much indeed.
Keep well, Chris.
Cheers.
Nuuspod. Onbevange, onbegrens, onbevooroordeeld.